Torah concept in the New Testament, put off the old man. Paul's phrase here from Ephesians 4 and Colossians 3 is about shedding a former identity shaped by sin and embracing a renewed life. While the Torah doesn't use that exact metaphor, it does contain structural and narrative parallels that anticipate the idea of leaving behind the old self and embracing the covenant renewal. So the Torah parallels to putting off the old man. First example, Genesis 35. Jacob commands his household to put away the foreign gods, purify yourselves, and change your garments. So this is symbolic shedding of old identity, idolatry, impurity, and clothing oneself anew, very close to Paul's metaphor. Next example, Exodus 12, verse 15. Remove the leaven during Passover. Leaven represents corruption. Removing it parallels discarding the old man of sin. Next example, Leviticus 18, verse 1 through 5. Israel is told not to walk in the ways of Egypt or Canaan. Rejecting the old cultural practices and living by God's statutes mirrors putting off the old life. Next example, Deuteronomy 10, verse 16. Circumcise the foreskin of your heart and be no longer stubborn. So, inner transformation means discarding the hardness of heart, anticipates Paul's language of renewal. Next example, Deuteronomy 30, verse 6. Promise that God will circumcise your heart so that you will love the Lord. So the covenant renewal through divine transformation is replacing the old self with the new heart, just like what Paul is saying. Key observations. The garment imagery in Genesis 35 is striking because Paul also uses clothing languages of put on or put off. The Torah already connects changing garments with purification and covenant renewal. The next example is purging corruption. The removal of leaven in Exodus 12 is ritualized, putting off of corruption, symbolizing a new identity as God's redeemed people. The next is cultural break. Leviticus 18, Deuteronomy 10 emphasize leaving behind the old ways of Egypt and Canaan and a collective old man identity. And then the next example is this heart transformation that God speaks of in the Torah, and Deuteronomy's call for circumcision of the heart is the clearest example of putting away the old man, discarding the stubbornness and embracing the covenantal love of God. Paul's old man language is essentially a midrashic extension of the Torah themes. Narrative, like in Genesis and Exodus, putting away idols, leaven, garments of impurity. The law, like we see in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, reject old cultural practices, circumcise the heart. And renewal, like we see in Deuteronomy 30. God himself enables this transformation, replacing the old with the new. So while the Torah doesn't use the phrase the old man, it repeatedly commands Israel to shed the old identities and practices and embrace a renewed covenant life, the same spiritual dynamic that Paul is applying to a believer's life in Christ. This is how Paul taught Torah.